Our lesson today is Zentangle Practice. Zentangles are a form of structured doodling in which you fill in areas with patterns made of line, shape, and value. You can also use color if you have colored pens. These are called Zentangles because people often use them as a form of meditation. We are going to use them to explore the elements of line, shape, and value. So for your materials, you're going to need a pencil, and I like to use a fairly hard pencil. This is an H pencil. So if you have a 2H or H or HB, you can use any one of those. A ruler, this is optional, but I find it useful because making your squares, it's helpful. And then you're going to need a piece of paper. I'm just using my sketchbook here, but if you don't have a sketchbook yet, you can use an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. And then felt tip pens. I have 3 felt tip pens here. They're slightly different sizes. And then I also have a marker, it's kind of like a Sharpie, but it's not a Sharpie. So that's what you're going to need for this. And I'm just going to move these off so I can work on my paper. So the first step is you're going to create the 6 2-inch squares on your paper. Again, you can hand draw them, but make sure they're big enough to work in. Don't make them too small. In the first square, divide it into 4 sections with a horizontal and a vertical line. You don't have to use a ruler, you can if you like. You can make this very structured or it doesn't have to be, but I'm going to make it pretty structured here. I'm just going to draw a line this way and then like this. So I've got a horizontal, whoops, that's not quite, see, I didn't quite do that right, but I'll get it. Take my eraser, kind of fix that up a little bit there. Don't want to be too structured with a Zentangle, but that's, now what we have next is the second square. We're going to divide it into 4 sections using 2 diagonal lines. You can go from corner to corner if you like. And this time I'm just drawing freehand. Oops. See there? But that's okay because we're going to be inking this. We can erase those lines. In the third square, we're going to divide it into 4 sections using 2 curved lines. So I can do something like this. Again, I don't have to go corner to corner, but I'm choosing to in this case. And then in the next 3 squares, I'm just going to create what I like. So maybe I'll do a vertical line, and maybe I'll do a diagonal line, and maybe I'll do a curved line. I can do loopy lines. Notice some of these are what's called symmetrical. We'll be learning about balance in the next session. And some of these are more freeform. That's fine. There's no rules here. Maybe in this one I'll use a couple of diagonals. That's a little bit curved there. And maybe one curved. So basically I've divided, this one I have more than 4 sections, but that's okay. Really, what we're really after here is practicing using the different kinds of lines and then seeing what happens when we actually repeat them and use them to create shapes and patterns. So now I'm going to take one of my pens. I'm just going to see what I've got here. This is a .03 micron pen. Oops. So now I'm just going to ink my first box. I'm just doing this freehand. Freehand means I'm not using any device to help me keep my lines straight. I don't want you to be too worried about making perfect lines in this. This is really a practice. So we have our horizontal and vertical lines. Notice how this gives us 4 basically square shapes. They're not quite perfectly square. And then I'll ink in my next one. I'm just inking in the basic shapes that I created here. I'm finding that my bottom line tends to be a little harder for me to draw, and you may find this. You can turn your paper. I'm trying not to turn my paper because it's set up in the camera just the way I want it. But if you find it difficult, you may want to just change the position of your hand. It's harder to control in some ways the line when you are locking it down the way I am. See, I'm holding my wrist down. That's not really a good practice for general drawing, but it's fine for this exercise. Really here, it's an exploration. We're just kind of playing with line. Line is what's going to create the shapes and the values that we make. So once you've got all of your squares basically set up, then you're going to come back and create some patterns inside the squares using line, and in some cases you may use a thicker marker to make solid black areas. If you're not comfortable yet using your pen, because of course it's permanent, you can start your pattern with pencil and then go over it. Or if you feel comfortable, you can go ahead and use your pen. I'm going to go back to my pen and I'm going to ink that line now. Sometimes when I'm first starting out, especially when I'm in a sort of awkward position here because I want to be able to show what I'm doing in the camera, I may start with the pencil just to be sure that I get what I want. But at this point, I'm going to come in and I'm going to start creating pattern. So let's say in here I'm just going to use diagonal lines, and I'm just repeating the same the angle of the line. Maybe up here I'll do a different angle. Trying to keep them evenly spaced. That takes a little practice, and I obviously need a little practice myself here. So there's my first, not very exciting, but my first effort. So I'm going to fill in the rest and then come back and you can take a look at what I've done. All right, so now I've filled in my patterns, and you can see that they kind of progress as I develop them. One thing I noticed is it really helps to kind of really get focused if you can. It is a kind of a meditative process. While you're making these, pay attention to the kind of lines you're using. Things like straight lines, curved lines, diagonal, horizontal, vertical. Just see what happens when you make those kinds of lines, because they'll create certain kinds of patterns. So then also look at when you've got a pattern, fill in some of the shapes with black, or by drawing repeated lines in them to create a lighter value. So you can see in some of these, especially this one and this one, that I've got some darker values. This one in particular has some very, very dark values in here, and you can see how even though it's filled with pattern, it still creates value. And same thing here. This is kind of a darker version. This is lighter, lighter. This one has a combination. So the denser you make your lines, or when you fill in with black, it's going to create more of a solid dark value. Well, it's actually not solid, but it is a dark value. So have some fun with this. This is practice, and we'll be going on to doing a full Zentangle next time.